Hello, today we are going to work through an SJT question for the UCAT. Here I'm going to show you something that's going to highlight a few principles that are very important. Also, I'm going to show you how tactically I go about answering these questions, which is something that you can carry through to any SJT question. So before I show you the question, I recommend that you check out this playlist here where it has all of this series where I'm going through questions from each of the sections and give you the most important tactics for how to answer them speedily and accurately. Those are the two most important things of the UCAT. I actually have a big series on SJT, which you can check out here, where we go through more kind of subjects that come up and how to answer those kind of questions. But then I've also got a top tip series, which is probably the most effective one because I take each section and I give you kind of a 10-minute video of everything you absolutely need to know, which is a condensed version of my online course. So I recommend that you check that out here because that's going to give you a really effective few strategies to help you score highly in the UCAT. So have a go. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to pick an answer, and then we'll work through all of the key themes that are showed up in this question and how to answer it, and then I'll reveal the answer at the end. Enjoy! Okay, good job. So well done for having a go at that question. Let's work through it now. Jack, a dental student, has been given a minor role in the annual charity comedy and cabaret evening hosted by the Dental School's Drama Society. He has been given a script, which he is required to learn for his role. On reading the script, Jack discovers that the comedy sketch he is involved in makes a joke about international students. Jack finds the joke offensive and feels uncomfortable about performing it. However, when he raises it with the other cast members, they do not share his views. How important to take into account is the following consideration for Jack when deciding how to respond to the situation. So this is a question you'll get a lot in SJT. So in the SJT, basically every question is going to be either how appropriate is this or how important is this. Although this is an importance question, I'm going to show you both how we define the appropriateness and the important one. So it's going to help you know which one you should select when it comes to those questions. So the first one, like I say, we determine top half or bottom half. For a very appropriate thing to do, it's a very positive action. For an appropriate but not ideal, it's not the best option, but it's deemed okay in the context. So those are the two kind of the good half, the upper half. Then the not so great one, so inappropriate but not awful, is ideally it should not be chosen, but it also isn't catastrophic, so there are some redeeming features. And then a very inappropriate thing to do, it should not only just not be done, it will likely lead to a negative consequence. So when you're thinking about these things, firstly think, is it top half or bottom half? If it's top half, you think, is there anything about this that doesn't make this answer perfect? And if it's not a perfect answer, then it's appropriate but not ideal. But if it's a perfect answer, then it's a very appropriate thing to do. Then if it's in the bottom half, you then think, is this completely terrible? Is this so bad that it's really definitely should not be done, and actually doing it will cause the situation to worsen or create a negative effect? And if it's not completely bad, maybe there are some redeeming features, there are some good elements of the answer or the suggested course of action, then in that case it's inappropriate but not awful. So that's how you need to think about these things. The most important thing when you're thinking about SJT answers is don't think of how bad the initial scenario is. You actually need to think how bad or good the course of action that is proposed is in the context of what's going on. So even if the thing is a really bad situation, but they take the best course of action for that, it is going to be a very appropriate thing to do or a very important consideration. So now that we've had a look at the definitions of appropriateness, let's have a look at importance, which is going to help us answer this particular question. So similar definitions for how to rate importance. So for very important means that you must do it. Of minor importance is something that you could do, but there's no consequence if you do or don't take the action. And not important at all is something that you definitely shouldn't do. Now, it's hard to apply these blanket definitions to every situation because obviously the context of the question sometimes doesn't match up to those exact definitions, but that again is the ethos that you should think about. So for importance, again, is it something that really needs to be done, that you absolutely must do or kind of really should be doing in an ideal situation? Or is it in that bottom half where you really shouldn't do it, or actually if you did the thing that they're proposing you would actually make the situation worse? Or is it more the kind of of minor importance where it's more of a neutral thing and actually you could or couldn't do it and it really wouldn't be of much consequence. So that's how you need to think about answering those questions. So let's go back to the actual question now. So how important to take into account is the following consideration for Jack when deciding how to respond to the situation? And that's really important. Is the situation is there, what should Jack do? How important is it for him to consider the following, which is that the audience may also find the joke offensive. Now, before we go to the actual answer, what's really important here is to discuss the issues that are raised. As a doctor and even as a medical student, you have a professional duty to the wider community. You can imagine, I always think of these situations, especially in SJT, as to the worst case scenario, and sometimes what we do in medicine is actually think of the Daily Mail headline of what they would say. So you can imagine that if they're saying maybe xenophobic things about international students, maybe even something racist, that actually that would reflect really badly on medical students, on the medical school, and the public's wider faith in the profession. That is the responsibility that you have. So that is the professionalism issue and what you need to bear in mind with a situation like this. Another theme that is raised here is that of raising concerns. Now, this is one of many subjects that come up in the SJT and ethical dilemmas that you need to have a good understanding of. So actually, if you want to know a lot more about all of the ethical situations that can arise, actually any questions that arise in any of the sections of the UCAT, I have this online course here where I cover basically every possible subject that can come up and every type of question and how to answer it in the most efficient and accurate way for speed and getting a high score at the same time. So I recommend checking out that course there, where it's going to show you for quite cheap actually, you get a year's access and have everything that you need to score highly in the UCAT. So would recommend going over and having a look at that. But when it comes to raising concerns, you have a duty to make sure that patient safety, and here in this case it's actually the public perception of the profession of medicine that is at stake here. So by allowing people to go out and say offensive things and kind of lose face for medical students and the medical profession, that is putting patients at risk in an indirect way, because if they don't trust doctors and they don't trust the healthcare profession, then they may not come to you and may not disclose information with you, or say if they are a international person, they might feel that they're discriminated against and won't be as comfortable seeking medical advice when they really should. So the General Medical Council, the GMC, the governing body for doctors, actually have some literature that they've put out about this. It can be difficult to raise concerns about your peers and your work colleagues, but the GMC Guidelines state that as a doctor, it is your duty to put the safety of your patients first. And like we said here, this is a more indirect way via the public perception, but that's also equally important and something to note for your interview if you get asked about a similar situation where it's not directly putting patients at risk, but is doing it via them not having as much trust in the profession as they would otherwise. So you must promote a culture of raising concerns openly and safely. So whistleblowing is important in medicine, because if something is wrong, it's important to have that culture of allowing people to speak up so that we can solve the issue and ultimately provide better care and safer care for our patients. So now that we understand the ethical principles, we can see why the answer is A for this. It's very important because if Jack finds the joke offensive, it's very likely that other people in the audience find it offensive. And like I say, the biggest issues here are some members of the public seeing future doctors, medical students, so future potential doctors, being offensive, being bigoted or whatever it is, or saying something that kind of makes people feel discriminated. Maybe it's somebody from that nation that's being offended, and that is why it poses a threat to them. So of course it's very important that somebody in the audience might find the joke offensive, because that might lead to complaints, it might escalate and get known by the wider public, and that can lead to all sorts of problems. So well done if you got that answer. I've made an entire playlist now for all of the questions that we've worked through here, so you can go through absolutely everything and understand, work through questions, and I'll answer them and discuss all the topics around them. Otherwise, if you want to check out that online course that I talked about, it's really effective. So loads of people who've come to me have told me that just by doing that course alone, they've massively improved their UCAT scores. We've got lots of testimonials of people who've done so as well. So I recommend you check out that. Thanks for watching today, and I will see you in the next video.